Today on the breakdown, this one has it all. The Wesley, formerly known as Artist, six-figure pots, hustler casino live cash games, hands perhaps being turned into bluffs at times, hands surprising that they're even seeing the flop, everything you could want and more, maybe coolers? Who can say? It's all going to happen right now on the breakdown where we are going to get ready to Bumble with Grant Dennison and Jonathan Levy.
I feel like you were really lost on that one. That was not a top tier opening.
There's
I'm just
a reason
being
why.
Why?
You were there for it. I did a different opening. I think we can all agree it was a top 5 opening of all time. But I said something in it which was a bit of a spoiler for the hand that we decided it was too much of a spoiler, and so we couldn't do it. But that may have been I won't say it was the best opening of all time, but that certainly was top 5. I mean, you were upset about it. You didn't cry, but I could see you were close to tears when you found out.
None of this is true. Also, the Wesley, formerly known as Artist, what the hell is that?
Fucking brilliant.
No, it is not. It's random.
His name was Wesley. Then he wanted to be known as Artist, the artist. And now that he's back on the show, he's called Wesley again. So he's the Wesley formerly known as Artist instead of the artist formerly known as Wesley.
Is he back on the show?
Incredible.
The hands we're doing today are from early 2023. So are you talking about him being on the show in early 2023 with the name Wesley, or is he back now as we record in late 2024 as Wesley?
He is indeed back now as we record in late 2024 as Wesley. Are you happy?
Okay.
Do you feel good? Do you feel like that was worth everyone's time?
I was actually curious. I was trying to figure out the chronology of the situation.
Do you see how incredible that sentence is? That's why you didn't like the opening. You were so caught up in that isn't even right. That's dumb. Instead of being like, that is maybe the best thing I've heard, which is where you should have gone.
Ever?
That's for other people to determine where it falls in the ranks of best things they've heard. I wouldn't say ever. I'm not the one to say it. That's for you and others to say. Commentators, Brad Owen, Poker News, whatever.
Okay.
Mark Testart, I don't know.
Let's talk about the player Wesley / artist, whatever. How would you qualify him? How would you describe him as a player? Because I think he's an interesting figure in cash game poker.
He is, to me, I would say, and I've only seen so many hands of his, to be clear, and I haven't watched him play much overall, but I've probably seen 80 Wesley hands or 75 Wesley hands in my life, and they're all like crazy pots and stuff. I would say he feels like, you love to talk about unsafe players. He feels like he is an unsafe player, meaning he could put pressure on you sort of at any time with a whole series of hands, not just the hands you might expect one to do it with. He has probably more bluffs than a lot of other players, but isn't so wildly unbalanced that he's easy to just call down necessarily either.
Yeah.
He wants to play big pots, and he wants to be the guy often being the aggressor as well, right? He famously played 2 of the biggest pots of all time when they were playing the $1 million cash game, one against Tom Dwan, where he bluffed all in, and Dwan called with queens on the river, and it was a over $2 million pot. And then he also had, I think, 4 or 5 bet with ace-7 suited, flopped 3 sevens, I believe it was, and got everything from, I think, pocket queens as well, but also in a $2 million pot in the same session, because he did the Tom Dwan one, and then he's doing it again with the ace-7, and he's like, oh man, I got a real chance to get paid here because I'm the guy who doesn't have to have it here, right? So that's my overall sense of him. What would you add to that?
Yeah, I think I agree with everything that you said. To put kind of a more of a holistic view on it, I think he's in the same vein as a lot of these guys who play in these hustler games who are just like whales from money that's not from poker. But he is, I think, much tougher than the rest of those guys. I think he can put you in really bad spots over and over again, and it's not, like you said, he's at least got some balance, so it's not just super easy.
My initial take on Wesley from seeing him a lot of like the hustler, like highlight hands or whatever, is one of the reasons why he plays. He's not really playing for the money. He's made like a huge amount of money trading, I think, crypto and stuff like that. But he wants to make the cool play. So he likes turning over his hand after a bluff and saying, art, it's art. And I mean, I think that's really stupid, but he likes to do that. And like, to me, that's the kind of guy who he's like going to be a little too fancy at times. Right? He's going to tap dance when all he has to do is waltz. He's one of those guys. there's guys like that.
Yeah, that's a common phrase in poker.
I have to say only trite fucking things that everyone says. I can't be original now.
You're trying. You're the guy who keeps saying we need to make content that appeals to a wider audience, not just people who are winning poker players.
Yeah.
So
right.
So be trite.
So you can't tap dance when all you need to do is waltz. You're going to tap dance yourself right off the pier, buddy. That's what my grandpa used to say.
Yeah. Did he die by tap dancing off a pier? That would be kind of like
dead. You should have said that. He's dead.
I don't care. Deal with it. You're 53. It's fine.
Maybe he died recently.
And then he had an amazingly long life. Good for him.
My grandparents all did live into their 90s, you son of a bitch. So it was possible that he just died. It's possible.
It's possible. Did he?
I mean, what's just? Just is relative, right? I mean, if you're looking at all of the Earth's existence, yes, he died a moment ago. And I'm raw. I'm still raw.
If he was the guy who was saying that all the time and then he literally died by tap dancing off a pier, that would be like the Segway guy. That would be a lot like the Segway guy.
What did the Segway? The Segway
he drove a Segway off a cliff. Yeah.
Why did he do that?
I don't know. I don't know the whole story. It was probably suicide. It's sad. I don't know.
It could have been for the lulls. Did he do it for the lulls?
That's commitment. That is true commitment.
It's a hell of a marketing play, right? You're like, I may die, but the Segway will live if I do this, And then
Segways kind of didn't live, though.
No, never really made a dent in any real way. Dude, when the Segway was coming, I still remember this. Before they announced what it was like a top secret project, but they announced that all these big companies were investing, and they were saying cities are going to be redesigned for these things. It's going to change everything. They thought people weren't going to walk anymore. They thought everyone's going to have a Segway the whole time, and no one was going to ever just use anything else for transportation unless you had to go a really long way. And it's like, no, that is not what we did, sirs.
I can see a little bit.
Futurists.
I can see why they thought that. I could see a little bit why they thought that, but it's obviously a bit myopic, right? Because a lot of people need multiple seats in whatever vehicle you have because they have a family or something. Like you have a family with all Segways. You're going to put your 4-year-old on a Segway and just hope it works out.
That's a great point.
Yeah. So,
also, you have to trust everyone to drive it well enough not to kill each other, and
that's true of cars already.
That is true, but we have licensing procedure. I guess we could have licensing for Segways as well. Yeah, okay. And I guess bikes is sort of the same problem. It's just Anyway, it didn't work. Ha ha. Now that guy's dead.
Ha ha. Wow. Dark. We're starting off dark like usual.
Keeping it real.
Let's get back to poker. We talked a little bit about poker already, so everybody can get off our backs. We talked about Wesley as a player. All right, get off of our backs.
Right.
Just relax.
We're just stretching our legs here.
If you want pure poker talk that we don't really mess around with, check out Table Talk. It's our other show. It's a podcast and video series. We think it's really fun and really good. It's shorter stuff. It's like 10 minutes. Right now, as we record this, we're releasing a series of stuff that's about a poker trip I took to Chicago, and I think it's pretty interesting stuff. Check it out. It's fun.
Yeah.
Other news,
you'll love it.
We have a website. It's pretty exciting.
Again, we're back.
Yeah. twopokerguys.com.
The number 2
right?
poker guys, to be clear.
Number 2pokerguys.com. That place has a bunch of our content categorized in special ways by our intern. And it's got places where you can submit hands and also submit your hands to be on Table Talk. We can talk to you on a podcast and video about your hands on Table Talk if you would like. That would be fun.
It's a new thing we're trying out. So you can actually come on the show and be part of the show for one show, one time. That's it. You don't get to
And coming soon to the website is some written content. We're going to have some written content. So get excited about that.
Oh God. You got to underpromise and overdeliver, son. What are you doing?
Basically, the poker guys are like Apple. Once you're in the ecosystem, you cannot escape. So just buy in, get in. Everything you get the blue texts back and forth from poker guys people. It's great. You should check it out.
Just like, I guess I have to go to that website now. I got to buy that Apple Watch. Okay, I guess. What am I going to do?
I can't do it.
I already downloaded all my songs on freaking iTunes. I can't re-download them and repay for them on something else. So I'm just stuck here forever, right? That's how they get
Steve Jobs' ghost has me over a barrel. There's nothing I can do about it.
Hey, that's the third dead guy we've mentioned.
Yeah.
All right. What's
Grandpa
the record?
Segway guy and Steve Jobs. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
Let's see who. Mark Antony. There's 4.
Wait, the singer, the guy who was married to J-Lo, is he dead? That's
Wait,
messed
no.
up.
He's not. I hope I didn't just.
He might be since we last checked.
Yeah.
You do have your Mark Antony Google alert, I know. So any news that comes, you get. But once the podcast starts, of course, you sequester yourself so that way you can focus, obviously. So you've been without your precious Mark Antony updates for a solid 7 minutes now. So anything could have happened, I guess.
All right. I'm going to get one. Socrates.
Yeah. What about him?
He's dead.
Dead? Have you seen the body?
No, but then there's like depictions of him drinking the hemlock, but that might be just like a global scam that's been going on for 2,500 years or whatever.
I mean, I can get Google to make an image of Socrates drinking frickin' punch, and
that's probably what Plato did back in the day. He's like, AI, create this image of my boss drinking punch so everybody will believe that I didn't do this to him and take his crown as the greatest philosopher.
Did Plato do this to him?
No.
Oh, okay.
I think Plato was his biggest fan.
Yeah. That's what
my understanding. But Plato gets to write the history on that, right? He was a prolific writer, so who knows?
Interesting point.
Knows?
History is written by the victors, except Jamie Gold. So another dead guy. That's 4. Okay, let's get to it.
It's a weird start. Let's go. All right. So this was suggested by Ryan's 7723, and so will the next hand that we do be. So this week is this hand with Wesley. The next week we're doing another hand with Wesley that happens later in the same session, and it has a lot of similarities. So I think it'll be fun to kind of see them together and see if Wesley is consistent and balanced and stuff like that.
Okay.
So this is a 100-200 game with a 200 big blind ante. Big game. There's a guy named Bobo who I've never once seen before in any of the suggested hands that we've done. I don't watch Hustler Casino Live, but I've never encountered Bobo before. Have you?
Yeah. No.
Well, either the 7 deuce game is on, I'm not sure, because the announcers don't say it, so I don't think it is, or Bobo is a psycho. So Bobo is +1.
Yeah.
Yeah, could be both. Bobo has 220K in his stack. He's +1. He's got 7 deuce of diamonds, and he min opens to 400. So even if the 7 deuce game is on, you got to open bigger, or you have to limp in order to limp re-raise, right?
I mean, I guess you could be min opening to 4-bet because you feel like you're going to induce some stuff, but really what you're going to induce is a lot of calls for the most part, not so many 3-bets, right? That is unbelievable that he min raises with 7 deuce suited. Wow. Okay.
At least it's suited.
Yeah.
It folds to Wesley in the small blind. He's got 500K in front of him, and he 3-bets to 2,500 with Jack 9 of diamonds.
Yeah.
What do you think about this?
I don't hate this because I'm believing based on the cards that Bobo has and the min raise combined that Bobo is a fish. And isolating the fish can never be wrong. So getting them all to yourself is probably a perfectly fine play by Wesley. Also, when you're crazy deep like he is, I assume Wesley's going to make less mistakes, big like 100, 200, 300, 500 big blind mistakes, or they're 1,000 blinds deep here, than Bobo's going to make. And so I think it's perfectly fine to do this. I mostly would call here, don't get me wrong. It's a pretty standard call, I would say, off the min raise. But I think it's really reasonable just to be like, that guy's awful. Why share it with anybody else? Like, let's play a pot. I want to play as many pots heads up with this guy as I possibly can. I'm going to make better decisions. At the end of the night, I'm probably going to have a lot more of his money than he has of mine, right?
Yeah. Well, and let's talk about sizing. Wesley chooses 6 1/4x, which is pretty big even out of position. But when we're over 1,000 blinds deep, do you think he should go even bigger against this player profile?
I mean, I don't think he needs to. He's not really going for a fold right now, right? That's not really the intention. It's just to isolate, I think. I think we assume Bobo's probably calling almost no matter how. I mean, I guess we could make it 15,000, but what are we doing then, right? Or 12,000, but like we could go absurdly large, but that's dumb. What are we winning? We're not winning enough to do that, right? There's not enough money in the middle now. The way you get money is to play a lot of pots with this guy, where you're probably you have the initiative, and he's terrible, right? So this seems like, I think this is fine. I don't even know if he needs to go this big if the intention is just to isolate. A 4.5x will probably do the job just as good.
I'm kind of thinking about this as maybe a mistake to 3-bet. I think Like this hand doesn't mind multi-way, right?
No, that's correct.
Unless big blind is really squeezy and we want to kind of take the play away from big blind, then that makes sense. But I much prefer this play in position against this player profile. It's so much easier to manipulate the fish when you're in position than out of position. Because out of position, if you have a fish, I don't know if Bobo's actually a fish. This is a fishy open, obviously. But like, assuming for a second that he is a fish, like an aggressive fish, obviously he's going to open 7 deuce. He's probably an aggressive fish. It's so much easier to play against in position than out of position. So I mean, like maybe we wait for a spot where we're in position to do this against Bobo with hands like this, that the hands that like are pretty and flop well, you know, whereas out of position, we can just pay less pre-flop and like hope something good happens.
I mean, that is incredibly reasonable and probably the best plan. But I think it's not horrible to do what Wesley's doing either. Having said that, even though I agree with you, I agree with you that what you're talking about has got to be more optimal than we just always 3-bet kind of no matter what our spot is, no matter what the situation, you know, feels because he's a fish. That's probably not good enough, really. But being this deep gives you the opportunity to dig out of a lot of things too, you know, which is nice.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I mean, it can't be bad, but I think maybe I prefer a call slightly. Anyway, the hand's not over. Bobo he's not opening 7 deuce suited to fold it, right? So he calls.
Sure. I mean, we're in position and we're deep. It's not, I mean, it's terrible, but it's not the end of the world, at least.
It makes it more likely that the 7 deuce game is not on, by the way, that he doesn't 4-bet.
I mean, I think a lot of times people in the 7 deuce game just will call 3 bets and then just try and, you know, check raise on the flop because it sets up your range to be a particular kind of a thing as opposed to you're just claiming to have aces all the time.
Yeah.
You know,
no, that's
it's
true.
more credible because if you're always 4-betting your 7 deuces as well as your strong hands, it may actually start to feel like there's a lot of 7 deuces out there, you know, there's 16 combos.
Yeah. I mean, the other way to combat that, of course, you'd have to have a lot of iteration with players and they'd have to see it a lot is to expand your value 4-betting range a little bit. You know,
that's right.
For sure, you're right. 4-bet 10s and jacks if you wouldn't usually type of thing.
Yep, you could do that. But it's also very reasonable to be like, well, I'm calling a bunch of stuff here. I can put 7 deuce in my calling range, especially now that I'm in position and we're wildly deep. Like, I can make plays at this guy. I plan on trying to make a play at this guy after the flop, right? Like, that's why I'm calling here. So that's not so bad to, like, cap it because if the guy has aces or a hand he's not going to fold to a 4-bet, especially, and the raise from the small blind implies he has a pretty good hand a lot of the time, even though he doesn't this time. Right?
Yeah.
Well, there's going to be a million boards that aces are going to hate when we're this deep, when we're 1,000 blinds deep. They're just going to hate it so much and not want to put in a crazy amount of blinds, right? One pair of hands are just going to hate so much stuff. So I can justify a call here, I think, as much as a 4-bet.
Yeah.
I mean, again, I don't know what if the 7 deuce game isn't on, I don't know what the hell we're doing, to be clear.
Yeah, I don't think it's on. So he's just doing it because he's Bobo and he likes to do this. So he is my thought. He calls. The pot is $5,400. The flop is Jack of clubs, 9 of clubs, 7 of spades. Top 2 for Wesley. Bottom pair, bottom kicker for Bobo.
Wild.
This is just like such an easy spot for Wesley right now. Like it's like, oh, it's a wet board and I have a very strong hand. I hope I get some action here. I'm going to bet, right? Yeah. So how much into 5,400 do you want to bet?
It's a very wet board. It's the kind of board that actually connects with our opponent's range pretty well. I think I want to size up a bit on this board. I think we're not, especially from Bobo, I assume we're not getting many folds if Bobo has anything at all, right? So I think we can go like 70, 80% a pot. I think we bet 4,000 pretty comfortably here, even 4,500. I think we're getting, I think bottom pairs calling us. I think gut shots are calling us when we're this deep. I think obviously club draws are calling us. Maybe ace X with just the ace of clubs is calling us. You know, there's just so much stuff. Ace queen with the ace of clubs is calling. I think one bet here, right? Like let's build the pot right now. We could go as much as pot. I think it's fine. I
agree. I like those thoughts. Yeah, I agree with everything you said. Wesley goes 3K into 5,400, which is bigger than a typical flop bet in a 3-bet pot, but still not as big as you're advocating for. But I think, you know, in 3-bet pots, usually the sizing on the flops is smaller, even on wet boards when your head's up. So he does go bigger than what would be expected, I would say. Bobo does call with his bottom pair, which is reasonable at this point. I think this is a reasonable decision, although it's a decision I sometimes don't make, even though, like, I'm sometimes when this deep, like supposed to make it because it's just like there's so few good cards. Like, and if he bets again on the turn, what am I going to do? Just
but Wesley will have some give ups on the turn in theory, at least, right?
Yeah.
Or, I don't know if Wesley himself has that many give ups,
Right.
but a lot of players in the field are going to have like, oh, I have ace king, I have ace queen. The guy called once, especially if I bet big-ish. I'm just going to check. I don't need to play a huge pot here. Like I can give up. We are so deep. It's not that big a deal, to lose whatever, $6,000 when we start with, over $250,000 deep. It's just like whatever, right? So, so I think we're calling both to improve as well as to see what our opponent does. Obviously, I think we're betting almost all turns if check to, whether we improve or not.
right, just equity denial.
Equity denial / bluffing / whatever.
I don't think we're bluffing any superior hands out.
Not yet, but we could be starting
Yeah.
to tell a story to bluff on the river if we wanted to.
Yeah. Anyway, pot's now 11,400.
Okay.
And it's at this point in the hand that Bobo says to Wesley, "Hey, Wesley, be careful. I'm very lucky." He says this to Wesley. and Wesley's like, "Okay, well, we've never played before. I guess we'll find out." So I guess these guys have never played against each other before.
Okay.
Turn is the deuce of hearts. Doesn't seem very lucky for
Seems
Bobo.
pretty unlucky.
2 pair for Bobo. Jack of clubs, 9 of clubs, 7 of spades, deuce of hearts.
I mean, that's a crazy card. Like
It is crazy.
if it's the deuce of clubs, it's going to slow everyone down. The deuce of hearts, everyone should think they've got the hand won right now, right? That they've completely got this in the bag. I mean, obviously they could lose, but
Bobo is thrilled with the card. Wesley is also thrilled with the card.
Thrilled.
It's not a club. It doesn't complete any straights. It's not a 7. That's really all he was looking for.
yeah.
I mean,
Even a
overcards, and it's not an overcard, right? An overcard could sometimes beat Wesley too.
I mean, it's so hard to imagine we're losing because of this card. I mean, it's pocket deuces is the only thing that beats us, which could be there, I guess. But like, whatever. There's 3 combos of them, and like mostly they may even fold the flop.
Yeah. So Wesley's thrilled. I think we want to continue to charge the draws. We want to, if we're lucky and Bobo has a big jack or something, we want to make sure he pays the maximum, especially if he has jack 10 or jack 8 or something like that, where he has a decent amount of equity against us.
Yeah.
So yeah, I like putting in a big bet. I'm just wondering if maybe a check raise is the way to do it, or if we should lead. I'm thinking back to the Ike Haxton hand, where he was like kind of generating a new way to create fold equity by double check raising. I'm not saying Wesley's double check raising, but if we want to maximize all those things that we were just talking about that a big bet can do, it's a bit of a risk that Bobo is just going to check back if we check, but we can really, really charge the draws and really put like jack 10 and king jack and hands like that in a tough spot that might really pay us off a decent amount of money if we check and Bobo bets like 80% of pot and we raise 3 or 4x of that. It's a way to really get the hand ramped up to the Thunderdome level.
It's interesting. I would be concerned that we're going to get so many folds if we go for the check raise. Maybe that's not true with Bobo, but that a lot of players are going to be folding a lot on the turn with hands that we really don't want to fold. Like all the 1 pair hands basically that are going to call if we go bet, and there's a bunch of them. Like pretty much any jack I think is going to go call. Any queens would go call, and I think queens are at least possible here. I don't know if they're likely, but they're possible. There are some worse 2 pair hands. There's a lot of stuff out there. I mean, we are going to get a bet most of the time if we check, I think. I think like pretty much this whole range is probably betting. Like there's a lot of draws there. I guess he could have like 9-10 suited and decide to check back, right? Where he's like got a lot of things working at the same time. Maybe doesn't feel the need to put more money in. But even 9-10 suited might just be like protect equity, get him to fold ace queen. It's a kind of a thing like win the pot. That's fine, right? I would think most of those. So we do get a bet out of him a lot. But I worry that like jack queen may fold if we check raise, stuff like that. And I would love to get 2 more streets from jack queen if we could. And I think it's possible too.
Right. But I mean, if you're looking at the expected value of the situation, it's possible, depending on the player that we're against, that even if queen jack folds and maybe king jack folds, the times that we aren't against those hands and we are against the continuing hands, we make enough money to make up for those hands folding.
There just aren't that many hands that are continuing, really, right? There's the monster draws that are continuing. Probably the nut flush draws continuing in position when we're this deep, right?
Yeah.
Maybe open-enders are continuing, maybe.
Yeah.
But most 1 pair hands are probably ditching if we 3.5x their bet kind of a thing, and it's like,
I mean, a lot of this I'm basing on Bobo's player profile that we have from the previous actions in the hand alone, which is just expecting him to be looser than most players.
Right.
Yeah.
And if Wesley's image, now, if they've never played together, maybe Bobo doesn't know who Wesley is. But if Wesley's image is sort of like a little bit of a crazy guy, which if I was playing against Wesley, I would be thinking that, right?
Yeah.
That would lead me to think as Wesley, I could get more calls from a check raise with my top two here. The problem is it looks like when we check raise, what are we repping? We're not repping a hand that's much worse or better than we actually have. We're kind of repping.
The way to balance it is to
okay,
also do it with hands like combo draws.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, a check raise is interesting. I think I'm not sure if we get more value check raising or if we just get more value going big bet here.
It's hard to say. I've definitely done this type of play against a Bobo type player before and had it really not work out. Where like we weren't 1,000 blinds deep, we were like 400 blinds deep, but he jammed on me after the check raise, and I was like, that's a little different. And I actually had top two on a board like this where there was, the one type of straight, and he happened to have that. I ended up calling because there were draws and stuff, and I was like, against this guy, I just have to call. But look at this position I've put myself in here.
That is too bad.
And he had it. Yeah.
I mean, you're probably screwed anyway, though. If you bet and he raises, you're calling, and then he's probably shoving the river and you're calling a lot. Now, there's some rivers maybe you can get away from it, but mostly you're calling the river anyway, and it's all the same, right? So I don't know if you're really protecting yourself that much. If he can just jam over your check raise, that's just, that's the same amount of streets either way of value. It's basically 3 streets of value from the turn on. I would hate to lose value against some of the hands that, if there are hands that are checking back, that means those are hands with showdown value that really might be calling the turn sometimes. I hate to lose that too. I don't know if there are hands that are checking back though. I think I would be betting most of my hands here if I called on the flop and the guy checked the turn. I think.
Yeah, like you said, you wanted to bet the 7 on most turn cards.
That's right.
And I think we would shed the 7, but it's not like we're going to get value from the 7 if we bet again anyway, right? If he has like 6, 7,
You're probably right. We're probably not getting value either way. That's a good point. And the other thing this does, of course, is, which we haven't talked about at all, is, and maybe not with Bobo, but Wesley is in a stream game, playing against a lot of people. A lot of people are watching him, having some level of balance to your give-ups here. So when you check, it's not always a give-up, right? You do want to have some very strong hands in your checking range here, too, and threaten a check raise. So even with me saying, like, I don't know if we're getting, like, if you're trying to build a whole portfolio of hands here that you want to play this way, a range, if you will, having some very strong hands in your check range is important too. You want to have at least a few in that bucket. So this could be one of them, and that's certainly reasonable if we're thinking about the meta game of all of it.
Yeah, and when we have top 2, Bobo is more likely to have a draw than a made hand on this board. So we get to charge maximum against the draws in those cases, and he's betting a draw, right? Like if he called with ace 10 on the flop, he's going to bet on the turn when we check.
I think for sure he's betting a draw.
Yeah,
it'd be weird not to. The other thing is you can get yourself in a weird position if you check raise where you could get 3-bet.
Yeah.
And I guess you could decide to fold because you are losing to pocket deuces, pocket 7s, and straights now. And the only thing you're beating is like the combo draw, which has equity against you anyway. You probably have to fold. But you would assume that the guy very few people have the stones, if you will, to make that play and not really have a very strong hand there. There's nothing else you would think would be in that range. They're not going to have just ace 10 off there, right, and move in. That seems very unlikely.
I'm not even sure a set of 7s or a set of deuces would move in over a check raise. The check raise is pretty strong. I don't know.
I mean, it doesn't look like Wesley has many straights, but he certainly can have jacks, right? Mm-hmm. Like jacks is right there.
Yeah.
And so, that's a fair point.
Anyway, that was all speculation because Wesley does the normal thing and he bets just a little under pot. He bets 10K into 11-4, which I have no problem with. I just wanted to explore an alternative option. I think it's a good play. I'm glad he sized it the way he did. I think it's good sizing. I think it could have gone even a little bigger if he wanted to.
I think way bigger. I like 13, 14K here, I got to tell you. I think especially when we're this deep, you could probably go 15, 16K. It's fine. Like the nut flush draw isn't folding. You might as well charge it. You have 80% of the equity against the nut flush draw. Top pair isn't folding, I think, for 10K or for 16K.
Well,
I think it's all the same.
It could go back to building a profile, right? If you don't need balance against Bobo, you might need balance in your profile so that the other players that you play against frequently have can't just put you on certain types of hands when you size it certain ways.
I mean, I hear that, but if we're not going to, we can be not balanced against Bobo, but balanced against other players, right?
That's true.
That. So if Bobo's like a special player, which at least he's a nominee to be a special player based on the min raise with 7 deuce plus 1 under the gun or whatever, or before the flop. So we could just decide I'm playing this way against Bobo and this way and the same way against this one other terrible player, and everyone else I'm going to do a different thing, and that should be pretty obvious to everyone. And if it isn't, that'll hurt them, not you, because if you actually are balanced, that's their problem, So I think that's how I would be thinking about it, as opposed to like I need to show everyone I'm being balanced against Bobo. If we can decide to exploit the hell out of him, but never Garrett, because Garrett is not someone we can exploit potentially, or Dan Zach or something.
Yeah, I agree. Anyway, Bobo calls. He could definitely raise here. I understand why he calls, but I think raising is definitely on the table. Wesley has some overpairs. I don't know what Wesley does with the overpairs. He's probably going to have to call a raise. I'm not sure. Again, it depends on what he thinks about Bobo. If they haven't ever played before, I don't know what Wesley does.
I don't know either. He may just dump it because they're so deep. Like you just would hate to get yourself. If the guy has a straight and you're drawing dead, or the guy has a set and you're drawing the 2 outs, both of which are very possible, right? Is it real? Do we want to? I guess we could call and play Fifth Street Chicken, as Bart Hansen likes to talk about, where we call with the intention of folding to a real bet on the river, but to see if the guy really is going to bet again. Because once we call the raise, if he bets again, he's much more likely to have it because we've shown real strength, right? We could do that, or we could just dump it now because it's like, I mean, look at all the reverse implied odds that I'm just like tumbling into here, right?
Yeah.
So I think we might just have to fold aces if we get raised, honestly. We could call, play Fifth Street Chicken, and hate our life, because usually people who are bluffing on the turn, well, some of them give up. People do give up on the river actually a lot. It depends on the player, actually.
Yeah, well, I don't know. So if Wesley's going to fold overpairs, obviously 7 deuce can't get called by an inferior hand.
Right.
So I don't know. I don't mind calling here. I think it's fine. There's a lot of scary rivers. We just deal with it.
Right. I agree completely. I think I prefer a call. We don't want to lose Wesley's ace, king, ace, queen if he wants to keep firing away. If we've been paying attention to Wesley, if he may know that Wesley has that Tom Dwan ace, king all in play on him, and maybe we'll just see a huge bet on the river just trying to blow us off ace, jack or something like that. And we just snap call with 7 deuce because we can beat all the overpairs now.
Yep. So Bobo calls. He's in rough shape.
Yeah.
The pot is 31,400.
Feels like a cooler, but
do you remember what Bobo said to Wesley before the turn came? He said, "Be careful.
I'm lucky."
I'm lucky.
Yeah.
The river is the 7 of clubs.
I mean, how is it possible that this went
the
this
running
way?
Full house? It is so rare
Against top 2.
Yeah. It is a club, so it's a third club that could save Wesley a little bit.
Yeah.
How do you want to proceed as Wesley? This is among the nut low cards in the deck. It might not be the nut low card. Maybe an 8 or a 10 of clubs is the nut low card, but this is pretty close.
I'm inclined to mostly bet small here. Not because I'm worried about my stuff, but because I'm trying to get called by a particular range, which is essentially ace jack. I'm convinced ace jack and all those jacks are just checking back. So I'd hate to lose value against those, which are the most likely hand we're up against, even though we have a jack in our hand. Maybe queens. Oh no, queens are beating us now. Jesus. But if we bet small, it's fine. Like if the guy raises, we can probably fold. Unless it's a very special player. We don't want to bet too small where we trick ourselves into thinking that he's going to have too many bluffs or anything. Agreed. We don't want to bet 1/10 of the pot. But if we bet 30% of the pot or something like that, that's an amount we would have happily check called anyway, probably. We've been like, I call. Probably.
I mean, we do that, if we do that with this hand, we have to do it with hands that aren't just scared of the card, right?
No. I think we do this with, if we're betting with most of our range right here because our opponent is now uncapped, right? They can have clubs. Now, which it turns out we can't beat, but sometimes we can. But either way, they can have clubs and they can have full houses and they can have trip 7s. Those are all very strong hands. So we should be afraid of that. Our range should be afraid of that, not our actual hand necessarily. But our range should be afraid of it. So we should be betting small and then responding in kind based on what our actual hand strength is. I don't think we should be betting based on our hand strength, only based on our opponent's range here.
Yeah. That's fair. Wesley ends up checking.
That's fine.
Yeah.
I mean, I like a bet way better, but Can we induce a bluff? I guess the gutters could bluff, but how are gutters still in here? Pair and a gut shot could bluff? Feels like there's no bluffs in there.
I mean, it seems like we're just trying to get the showdown, which fine, but
that's fine.
They don't always let you do that, especially when they have a full house.
Right.
So as Bobo, to me, it looks like Wesley has an overpair or ace jack or something like that.
Yeah.
As played. I don't think Wesley has clubs too often. I think Wesley would be betting clubs on the river. So how big do you want to go to try to get value from that range?
I don't think we can bet big, right? When clubs come in the 7 pairs, how can we bet super big? Right? When we have very little bluffs ourselves, what bluffs do we have? We should have a lot of hands that are happy to check back.
Yeah.
Right? Jack 10 should be like, check. Did I win? Do you just have the naked ace of clubs? What happened?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So I think we have to bet small because Wesley's range now feels weak. And we're actively trying to get called here.
Right?
Yeah. So I would bet like 20% a pot, some 25%.
That's really small.
Pot.
That's really small.
Yeah. I mean, how is Wesley supposed to call with anything?
I think you can justify like a half pot thing and just hope he shrugs.
I mean, what's he supposed to? I mean, I guess if Wesley has an overpair with a club, he might shrug and call.
Yeah.
But I guess if he doesn't have a club, he's going to fold either way. Maybe is that true? But if we bet at 20% of the pot, we're getting called by I think all the overpairs. Well, I don't even know if that's true. Maybe that's not true. Maybe we should bet more because maybe we're getting too many folds even when we bet 20% a pot. So if the same range is calling 20 and 50%, we should bet 50%.
Well, Bobo chooses the third path.
What is that?
35K into 31-4.
Oh, okay. So he's going polarizing.
Yeah.
It's hard to come up with a hand, though, that he has that would want to bet that way unless he's turning a hand into a bluff.
Ace 10 with the ace of clubs. Ace 8 with the ace of clubs.
Those
are the, yeah.
Those are the hands. Everything else is strong value.
Maybe ace 9 with the ace of clubs. He turns into a bluff because he puts Wesley on the jack or better when Wesley takes this line.
Maybe. Yeah. Maybe. Wesley could have 2 10s, though. Maybe go bet. Maybe. Without a club in his hand? I don't know.
Anyway, Bobo goes 35K. I don't know if it's reasoned out or if it's just Bobo has full house and Bobo wants to bet 35K.
I think it's that. But whatever. Okay.
So we kind of outlined the value range that Bobo would have if he bet the river. It's like trip 7s plus, right?
Yeah.
7, 8, and 7, 10 specifically. I don't think he gets there with other 7s.
Correct.
Yeah.
Unless he has ace 7 off with the ace of clubs somehow.
Yes.
That's like all we have left.
Yeah.
So I guess he can have that based on the fact he has 7 deuce.
So those 3 types of 7s.
Yeah.
I don't think he goes this size necessarily with those hands though. Like it's when the third club comes.
Right. He might bet smaller because he's afraid like, how can I get called by a hand that's worse than mine? Right. So he might bet half pot like you were saying.
Yeah.
Try and get called by aces. Yeah.
Well, if this is just his sizing, no matter what, when he has value, then I guess maybe it works out that he could just have those hands.
Maybe. I don't know. I don't know that he's going to bomb trip 7s here.
What about clubs?
I think clubs make more sense to bomb, but it kind of is the same problem in the end, right? Because like Wesley doesn't rate to have very many trip 7s himself, which clubs could be targeting. But Wesley doesn't have many 7s at all here, right? We know he can have some because he has Jack 9, but he doesn't have. You wouldn't think he has many at all. So we're still targeting overpairs essentially either way. So I don't know if it really changes anything. So on one level, I feel like you should be able to. I would think I had the best hand with clubs for sure. I'd be pretty sure with trip 7s. With clubs, I'd be like, I've got the best hand. Like, how do I not have the best hand? I always have the best hand. And I would bet with that in mind. But again, we just have to target what Wesley's range. And if Wesley's range feels like one pair most of the time. Right. So how can we bet big if it's one pair?
Well, forget that because Bobo bet 35K.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
So like he might bet it with trip 7s is what my point is. Like whether or not we think he should.
Yeah. He might bet it with a flush. He might bet it with trip 7s.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fair enough. It feels like we are really losing right now as Wesley when he bets 35K.
Yes, it does. It feels like he has trip 7s or a flush or maybe a slow played 8-10. I don't know if he would. I mean, like it's a scary card for 8-10 also, but
I think it rates almost as always a flush here. Like trip 7s, as you said, it's really hard to have a 7 and get here. It's possible, of course, but it's hard. Clubs make so much sense. Now he had to call the turn, so maybe he had a pair with the clubs, or maybe like could he have ace deuce of clubs or something like that, or maybe he had a straight draw with the clubs. Maybe some deal like that. You know, he had king 10 of clubs or something, ace 10 of clubs. So he could call the turn bet comfortably. Or maybe he just called anyway with nut club draw because or the king X of clubs because they're so deep and he's in position. He can try and take it away anyway if he misses once in a while. I don't know. He's got clubs, is what I would think.
He also has 7 deuce for a full house.
Yes, he does.
So as Wesley, it does look like you're losing against this size.
Yes.
Right? So I don't think we should be calling with this hand against this size. We can fold, which is the normal play, or we can raise because we block full houses. Right. And we're putting him on clubs and expecting him to fold clubs sometimes. This is a very hard thing to decide to do against a player that you've never played against before, right? If you don't know the player type, you might need to wait and see what type of player he is before you make the super high variance 6-figure play. I don't know. What do you think about that?
I mean, I think it's okay. You want to have some bluffs in your range in general. Yeah. Now, there's some players you don't want to have bluffs in your range against, but I assume playing 100, 200, probably even some of the special players, you want to have at least a bluff or two. You know, they need to know you're capable of bluffing. So, so I think having at least a few bluffs in there is good. And this is one of the better hands to bluff with for sure, right? This is a pretty great bluffing hand. Yeah,
it might be the best.
I don't know. Is ace jack with the ace of clubs better? Maybe that's better
because the nut flush might call where other flushes fold.
And also, I would think that Bobo rates to have more flushes than full houses.
But if he doesn't have a flush, then it's kind of like we're going to win anyway, basically.
Oh. Right, that's true. That's true. But if he does have a flush, blocking the nut flush may help us. You know,
it only helps in that if Bobo calls nut flushes and folds sub nut flushes.
Yeah, which I think is.
So I think I'd prefer to block the snap calls and snap raises instead with the Jack 9. I think I prefer the Jack 9.
Okay, that's fair. That might be better. So this may be the best possible bluffing hand. Then that really may be so. With it
really might be. And Wesley goes for it. So I think that's a good play.
I like it too in theory.
It's a good play in theory. It all depends on Bobo. And if Bobo is Bobo going to just call with the 6 high flush here? We don't know. If he's the guy who's going to do that, then this is a bad play. But Wesley doesn't know either. So all he has is theory, right? So that makes it ultimately a good play in my opinion.
Yeah. I think
but if you have a lot of,
this is like not to use the solver as an answer key, as our intern, Chris Jones, mentioned yesterday when we had a meeting with him, which I thought was such a great way to talk about the way a lot of people think of the solver as an answer key, which is not really a useful way to think about it in my mind, or in his, or I believe in yours. But so not to do that. However, I think this would be one of the very first bluffs the solver would ever have, and however many bluffs it has. So if we're ever going to bluff, this is probably one of the hands we need to do it with, right? So, and we probably do want to bluff at least sometimes in this spot, even against Bobo. So yes, we should probably bluff this hand. That's probably part one. Question number 2 is how much should we bluff for? How much do we need to raise here for our bluffs? If we're trying to get a flush to fold. Let's say we're
so I guess we can only go with theory land. We can't go with a player profile, right? Because if we had a strong player profile on Bobo, I could say how does he react to sizing? And is he going to fold to bigger sizing with flushes and call smaller sizing with flushes? Do we have to make it look reputable, or do we just scare him with money? Because that's a big question that you have to ask yourself in cash games is do I want to make this look reputable, or do I want to scare him with the amount of money it is? Right. Wesley, I think, tries to make it look reputable while going at the higher band of possible reputable. Goes 125K, which I think is what I would choose. Is I
like it.
I want to kind of do both, right? It's reputable, but it's the highest version of reputable. So it's the scariest reputable amount.
It still is reputable. It could be if you have a flush, you have to strongly consider calling for 125. But if you really have a flush, you're like, how can I ever call? Aren't I always beat here, man? It's a lot. Yeah. And he could have just bet himself, or he could, if he was bluffing, it's a tricky thing to bluff this card because he needs me to even bet for him to even be able to bluff this card, right? Now it turns out Wesley is the kind of hand that is sort of this plays perfectly for as a bluff, right? Where he's checking, thinking he wins sometimes. If it goes check, check, he wins a lot. And as soon as it gets bet like this, he knows he's no longer winning, right? So the data changed his mind there.
Yeah. So I don't know what Bobo would have done with a flush because he doesn't have a flush. He has a full house. He has the second worst full house possible.
It's not too different than the nut flush the way it's playing here. Like blocking a 7 doesn't matter very much, but it does. We're not. It matters some.
Wesley 3-bet with Jack 9 suited. He could have a 7x full house.
Of course he could, but it's not super likely, right? Because now he has a 7-9 suited and Jack 7 suited or pocket deuces. That's the only way that stuff is blocked. It's just not. It's of course it's possible, but it's such a tiny part of the range. I think we don't have to worry about that. So I think it plays kind of similar to the nut flush here. I think we should make the same decision with those two hands is what I'm trying to say.
Perhaps, maybe, yeah, maybe so. I think knowing Wesley, and I assume Wesley's been on the stream a bit at this point, and Bobo's probably seen him play, this is probably just too good of a hand to fold against Wesley.
Yeah. Oh, I think so. Also, if Wesley had a monster, I'm not saying he would never check raise the monster, but mostly you're going to bet, especially when all the scary stuff comes in, right? Because you figure our opponent has a lot of checkbacks.
You're saying he's unbalanced towards bluffs then?
I'm wondering if he is at least.
Okay.
I'm speculating. I don't know if that's really true, but I'm talking about it at least.
Yeah.
I think it's possible he's unbalanced toward bluffs because you'd be so worried that this is an instant check back, right? Instant check back. If you made the nut flush, let's say Wesley has ace king of clubs here. Or jack. Wouldn't you bet, hoping your opponent has a flush, but also trying to get value from jacks and stuff like that? I feel, single ace jack. I feel like you would.
I mean,
so I'm just not sure I'm not sure how believable this is. Of course, I'm not saying he can never have it when he does this. Of course he can, but
it depends on how balanced Wesley is, right? Like if he's doing this profile creation thing that we've talked about over the course of his live stream games, then he's going to have to be relatively balanced here and have value here sometimes.
Right. But at the same point, we were talking about how we think he's like overly fancy, likes to have super fancy, cool plays. I would say the fancy, cool play is to have a lot of check raise bluffs on the river. Like that's a fancy
It's actually a fancy, cool play with value too, though.
It is fancy, cool. It's way more fancy though to not have it than to have it. But both of them are fancy. I grant you. Yeah. And in fact, you grant. I grant you. You grant.
Yeah. And Bobo snaps. It's over quick.
The fact that he snapped means I don't know if Wesley was going to get this through against the flush either.
Yeah. Bobo has been learned about by Wesley now. We've learned about Bobo. Wesley makes the appropriate face when he sees what Bobo has, and then we move on. And Wesley still has plenty of money in his life, and he's going to be fine. Yeah. And we will see him again next week on the breakdown in a similar spot in the same stream. That's going to be exciting.
All right. So we'll have we'll have all this data now to play into it. The metagame is in full effect.
Right. It won't be against Bobo, unfortunately. We're not going to get Wesley versus Bobo 2 Rumble in the Hustler Casino Live area.
You can't say that, dude. That's copyright from Michael. What's his name?
You can't say Hustler Casino Live area? I think that's what they call where the table is. The Hustler Casino Live area. That's what they call it.
I mean, they might.
And we'll travel back there next week. Join us on the breakdown.
Music is my sunlight, and all I need is one mic, and I can show every single MC how it's done right. Every time I come by, I'm bound to leave them tongue-tied. I'm sipping on liquor, a quitter is what I'm not. We got one life, and I took a minor break, but I'm back to claim the throne. And gonna be traveling the globe, and still have time to make it home. And you gon'